For the absolute longest time, Twitter has been a mystery to me. So for those of you who are new to the channel, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Brian and I'm a software engineer. I've worked in software development for a very long time for a lot of different companies and even independently for a long period of time as well. And within that, I'm going to kind of weigh in on this thread that I'll include a link in the description. I'll also include the whistleblower report for Twitter in and of itself, because I've always been curious how a company can constantly lose money and yet still be considered so valuable that somebody spends a bucket load of money on it. Now, in this thread alone, I think there's some hints that answer that question, but it also, I think, goes to show just how much a problem Twitter has been on the back end. This doesn't answer all of my questions, but I wanted to sit down and kind of walk through it with you guys because I think it's interesting information, if nothing else, for the discussion alone about the platform of Twitter. This isn't a left or a right or a political thing, because at the end of the day, I'm very curious to see what the future of Twitter has. But my wife and I have always talked about Twitter being this weird, absolute garbage fire. And it's interesting to see kind of that reaction shift over the last couple of months, where people seem to be like talking about how amazing it was. And I don't know, it's something to explore. I've actually had more fun on Twitter over the last couple of weeks than ever before, but it has yet to be seen what will be the future of the platform. But anyway, speaking of a software engineer, Avant Halaby is the one who's kind of breaking this down, going through the disclosure. And while I'm not going to read all the quoted like images and stuff like that they kind of point to, I want to highlight on their key points. And there are several here, and hopefully you'll find some of this interesting. At least I found this really wildly interesting. So they start, the stuff covered with the Twitter whistleblower report is much crazier than anything in the Twitter files, but it has more, but it's not really politically or tribally salient, so it really isn't getting any much attention. One of the reasons why I wanted to see if I can't also give this some attention here on YouTube. Twitter didn't monitor employee computers at all. It was not uncommon for employees to install spyware on work devices. And this one actually goes to say that they were specifically installing this piece of software per request. In this alone, it seems like this was a weird company to be a part of, and it existed, and yet there was like subterfuge and like sabotage and all this going on behind the scenes. So again, very interesting read if you guys want to go jump into the quoted text or the full report in and of itself. Anyway, Twitter doesn't actually have a separate development, test, staging, and production environments. At least 5,000 employees had privileged access to production systems, which is a dangerous thing to have access to. I've seen and worked, and I'm not going to get into the specific companies, but there's like, you find all these flaws and ways that people can come in and just ruin your day, ruin your system, set you back, it's kind of what we call cowboy IT, where you're just kind of in the wild west of it. And that's what I get from these kind of just the start of this video itself. Is like, it sounds like they were a startup that never was able to evolve, but they ended up having a ton of money, a ton of employees, constantly losing money. And so there was always this thing in my mind that I was just looking at them as a company going, what is going on over at Twitter, and why does this platform even exist, despite its, whether you like them or not. So in 2020, Twitter had a security incident serious enough that they had to be reported to the federal government, and on almost a weekly basis. Meanwhile, Parag Agrawal, was lying about how secure Twitter was. And then it goes in to kind of quote this, and then kind of goes to refute it. So on 1/6, Mulge, the whistleblower, wanted to take action to prevent potential sabotage by a rogue employee. He learned it was not possible for Twitter to secure the production environment. Then he goes and realizes that the data center failure could potentially cause the permanent loss of all of Twitter's data. He shared the fact with senior leadership, who instructed him not to put it in writing for the board, which that in my mind, and that's why I quote tweeted this over to Hogue. I don't know if any other lawyers has covered that, but in my mind, that's a massive red flag. Lawsuits, dangerous thing. Like, that's where laws are being, in my mind, like, that's a no-no. That's an absolute bad thing to do. If someone ever has you do that or requires you, make sure they don't have like power over you because you're going to be the one thrown under the bus. Like, I've seen this happen multiple times. Like, you have this, like, the bro code or whatever that some of these companies will be like, yeah, we're okay. Yeah, we're good. And as soon as it goes south, you're the sacrificial lamb. So just always make sure that no matter if someone's asking you to do something that's a violation of the law, especially in this regards, like, stand your ground, be willing to lose your job over it, because the consequences, I think, are far worse. A few months later, that exact eventuality came true. Only a particular Herculean effort by Twitter engineers prevented permanent, irreparable failure. So what he said was going to happen happened, and that ended up causing the issue. Twitter had no software development lifecycle. It misled both the FTC and its boards about this fact for a decade. What was going on over at this company? What was going on? What were they doing over there? Like, anyway, with as many employees, like, hey guys, this is a massive amount of work. This is a big problem, but it doesn't seem to, no one seemed to care, right? Or at least that's my interpretation as an outsider in this regards. Mudge informed Agarwal that there were thousands of failed login attempts onto Twitter's engineering system every day, and they did nothing about it. We just highlight that. You can see here around August 2021, notified the then CTO and others, the login system for Twitter's engineers was registering on average between 1,500 and 3,000 failed logins every day. A huge red flag. Agarwal acknowledged that no one knew that and never assigned anyone to diagnose why it was happening or how to fix it. Twitter did not keep backups of employee computers. They used to, but then the system broke. It was never fixed. The execs decided it was a good because it meant that they couldn't comply with regulators. And so then it goes in here, no employee computer backups around Q3 to Q4. Mudge learned that no Twitter employee computers were being backed up at all. Supposedly, Twitter's IT department had managed backup system for years, but it had never been tested on Mudge. Learned that it was not functioning correctly. Obviously, this raised fundamental risk for corporate data integrity, including financial data or any other information needed to be recovered that was located exclusively on employee laptops. In the extent of a financial staff's data was at risk, it could constitute material weakness and internal notification controls required under SEC regulations. Other Twitter executives aware of the company was chronologically out of compliance with most government requests for information tried to look on the bright side. Nothing that going forward that Twitter could have a valid excuse for not responding to regular queries about which data particular employees had access to and on which days. They expectantly decided not to replace or fix the employee backup system, but instead discontinue the service entirely. All right. Every new employee has access to data they did not need access to. Twitter will also probably still be vulnerable to Log4j to this day. And then Twitter does not have licenses for the machine learning models. Twitter knowingly allowed itself to be infiltrated by or otherwise a tool of many governments, which I don't think surprises us based off all the other information that we're seeing out there in that regards. And some of the other stories that aren't even referenced in here were just kind of other red flags. After Agarwal became the CEO, he wanted to present materially misleading information to the board, overriding Mudge's objections. Other employees raised similar objections. Ultimately, it seemed that the material was shared anyway, and Mudge described the presentation to the board as fraud, which that would be. I really hope we get a lawyer on this just to get that extra lawyer insight. Internal review after meeting confirmed his assignment. Mudge began working on a report to correct the record with the board. As his report neared completion, he was fired. And then you can see the full whistleblower report again, like over here. And it's just, in and of itself, when you're talking about knowingly being kind of a tool of the government, I think knowingly installing software, getting this kind of information out there, it does feel like my interpretation of this entire event has been that Twitter was being propped up by many sources who felt it was like this tool for like people. Somebody was tweeting out like that Twitter's now a tool of disinformation. I think it's always been a tool of disinformation. I think it's always been more of a divisive tool than anything else that has existed, and thus in and of itself was useful to governments and to various different bodies to farm up data based off its popularity. And that's one of the things that I was like, how is it continuing to be funded? It ended up feeling like it's like this loss leader for, I don't know, keeping us divided rather than trying to let the people get united, because it's so easy to misunderstand text. Like, I've had a couple people try to like argue with me, and I'm like, hey, do we want to take this to Discord? Now I think Twitter at least has the stage thing. like if we want to take and discuss, I think it's so much easier to have this kind of conversation, this kind of setup, this kind of discussion, or like a one-on-one in Discord or something like that, where on Twitter things just get easily misunderstood, or and can get really frustrating really fast. But at its core, I think I listened to Elon talk about kind of like with he did this stage thing with a bunch of people. It was really big. But he was talking about like his core issue, his core focus, his one, because he didn't read, like he said, he didn't read any of the files, etc., was fixing the engineering problem within Twitter. And if this is all like absolutely 100% accurate, he's got his work cut out for him. Now, thankfully, like if he's not trying to preserve the old way and the old process of things, they can start to spin up these environments. And there, I think, is a way forward for them to fix all these issues. The question that I just would want to know, and if you guys know the answer to it, sound off, is that, like, is he now liable for all of Twitter's past, or is there like a hard new line, like, hey, he took over, okay, we see these issues, we are fixing these issues, here's the proof of this. That will have yet to be seen. But at the end of the day, I'm sure this is going to be a continual thing to explore, to discuss, and to watch, just to see ultimately what happens. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for your time. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, links are in the description if you want to go check out these sources. And yeah, put some light on it, and you guys can weigh in with your own thoughts too. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the rest of your day. Hopefully I'll see you in my next video. But until then, take care.